know them. So I think we'll forego the formal introductions. But we'll give everyone, there we go. Okay, so as I said, welcome to Research and Clinical Trials Updates with Dr. Jerry Vockley and Dr. Melanie Gillingham. Take it away, guys.
Thanks, Kara. Welcome, everybody. We have a few slides to just talk through current clinical trials that are going to be enrolling or enrolling now. I'm going to start with one, and then I'll turn it over to Dr. Vockley. For patients living in the United States, if you haven't seen this survey, I'd like to ask if you can to get on and do a survey about the impacts of COVID-19 for you and your family. It's sponsored by the Rare Disease Consortium, and when we found out they were launching this, we approached them and they've added fatty acid oxidation disorders into the list of diagnoses. So just a little bit about the survey. It is for rare disease patients and their caregivers. They say it takes about 20 minutes to complete, and it's going to ask about the impacts of the pandemic on physical, emotional, and availability of supplies and access to care. The reason this will be really helpful is that my institution and Dr. Vockley's are starting to slowly open up for clinical trials, and it's really helpful for us to figure out how to plan when we're going to ramp up recruitment to know kind of how the pandemic is affecting you and your families. And the NIH that's collecting this information is going to be able to share it with us. So if you can, I'd really appreciate it if you could fill out this survey to help us sort of plan when we can start restarting clinical trials. I think all of us are struggling with when is the right time to open back up clinical trials when it's safe for our participants and our staff. So there's the link, rarediseasenetwork.org COVID survey. I think there's a link on Mito Action, and I think there's a link on the Inform web page. So there's lots of ways to access this survey. So thanks so much for considering doing that. And I'm going to let Dr. Vockley talk a little bit more about the Inform platform.
All right. Thanks, Melanie. Just to follow up on a little bit on the restart of clinical trials, that is very much an institutional decision. So, for example, we've actually been given permission to open up our sites for clinical trials. Now, there are some trials that we've been moving on a little slowly, and some that we're not going to be opening up at all, depending on the level of risk. In particular, those that require immunosuppression, like a gene therapy trial, or I have for a different disease, a liver cell transplant trial. And we're just not opening those up right now, and probably won't for a considerable time. So you should always keep in touch if you're already in a trial with the study coordinator that you usually contact regarding a trial, and if something that you know is scheduled to be open, you can usually get that information on clinicaltrial.gov. But if you just email the study coordinator you're used to dealing with, or one of the PIs, because we're usually available, we can let you know. What I'm going to start off with is one other set of sort of more generic comments rather than specific ones, and then I'm going to get into a couple of specific trials that I'd like you to know about, and that is in regards to the use of Inform as a clinical trial platform. One of the things that this consortium was put in place to do was to try to get a certain level of competency around the country for clinical trial sites to do clinical trials, and specific to fatty acid oxidation disorders. And it started off as an NIH grant application, and as I mentioned earlier in one of my other talks, we're definitely going back that direction. But it's been functioning otherwise. We've used it for a really nice survey study on GA2, a paper of which just got published. It's been a good forum for folks to get together at our annual conference, and we present the nitty-gritty details of the clinical trials that are going on. We would like it to be part of the NIH Rare Disease Clinical Research Network. It's not there yet, but we're in the process of trying to make that happen. However, one of the things that I think we will see in the future is that we hope that we'll be able to be available to facilitate industry-sponsored trials. And if we go to the next slide, I will talk a little bit about what's happening with Ultragenyx. As you've heard several times now through the course of the conference, the triheptanoin has been approved, and so it moves out of clinical trials for approval, but there are a lot of long-term follow-up the opportunities here that will help us learn both about the diseases, things that we just haven't had the opportunity to collect information on, as well as the how well the triheptanoin does, and in particular how it affects the individual components of the diseases. So there's going to be a lot of work going forward for the next hopefully 10 years for trials that Ultragenyx is both mandated by the FDA to do and has volunteered to do in some extents. So you heard a talk by one of the Ultragenyx folks, I think on day one, about some details on these trials, and so I'm not going to go into all of that, but I do want to alert you that that they'll be available, and we've been talking to Ultragenyx about how this can interface with Inform. We've got interactions with most of the centers that would need to be part of something like this, and it would be an excellent starting point for us. The word for this will get out both by way of Ultragenyx and Inform and MitoAction and the FOD group. So there'll be lots of opportunities to get a hold of that. I wrote here that eligibility will be anyone treated with C7, and that's true. Anyone, whether they've been on the trial or not, will be eligible for this study. But if I understood some of my earlier conversations with Ultragenyx correctly, we're actually going to be able to enroll anybody with a fatty acid oxidation defect who wants to be part of the trial, and it gives us a little bit of a built-in comparison for those folks who are or move to triheptanoin fairly quickly, to those who elect to wait a bit. So we'll be sending out more information about that, or Ultragenyx will be sending out more information about that. The number of sites is yet to be determined. There was some sense that we should have a small number of sites and bring people there. I've been talking to the Ultragenyx folks about opening it up a little bit, just because it means less travel for patients. So we'll see what happens. The original that I had heard when my first discussions with Ultragenyx, that these would be 5 to 7 years, but on Friday we heard that they are likely to be 10 years. So this is quite a commitment on your part. It's quite a commitment on Ultragenyx, but this is critical information. There's just so much we yet don't know about the natural history disease, especially if you take into account that newborn screening for these disorders is only about 20 years old. So a lot of our newborn screening cases are just hitting their third decade of life. And of course, we have patients who've been diagnosed clinically who are older than that, but our whole data set on adults with fatty acid oxidation disorders, at least the more severe ones that we traditionally thought of as affecting kids, as opposed to the later onset ones, have really been, we just don't have those data. So please consider being part of this. And then next trial, next slide, please, Melanie.
Trying, hang on. Oh, there we go.
There you go. I have mentioned this a couple of times already, the MCAD treatment trial with phenylbutyrate. The status of it is pending funding, and so hopefully if I find a sponsor for that study, it will ramp up quickly because we've already done the early phase trial. Remind you here that the 3 individuals who participated in the very early trial on this, we were able to show meaningful decreases in their metabolite accumulation, suggesting that this drug was in fact working to stabilize the MCAD enzyme. And I spoke with someone who is using this for their MCAD deficiency, and because he was having lots of other problems, and he tells me that everything has cleared up. So I think this is going to be a really promising study. Once we get it up and running, it will be for anybody 14 years or over. It will require 2 hospitalizations, one to come in and check your baseline, and then another will be a double-blind placebo control phase where you won't know what you're getting, we won't know what you're getting, then we'll bring you back and do all the testing again. Right now, it's only set up to be here, but that was only because in the early going, we didn't have very much money and we just did it locally. But depending on the funding available, we'll enlarge that. But if we do have to limit it to Pittsburgh, it will come with support for travel. Next, please.
Not sure what.
Go ahead, Melanie.
I wasn't sure if this is the right order, but
yeah, this is right. It's just a prompt for me to remind you all that we've talked about the individual disorders of these individual enzymes. But there's a disorder that hasn't gotten very much discussion at this meeting. And next slide, please. And that's glutaric aciduria type 2. And I'm sorry, back up one more, please, Melanie. The thing that that we've talked about relative to this slide previously is this molecule, acetyl-CoA, as being something that goes into the TCA cycle and helps fuel the electron transport chain, or the respiratory chain. However, the next slide, it also serves as the starting point for the synthesis of ketone bodies. And ketone bodies are an alternative fuel that can be used for energy production in the body. Now, I said this is of interest to the GA2 folks. Why is that? If you can show the next slide, please. The problem with GA2 is it's not a single deficiency, but it's a deficiency of a molecule that is necessary for all of these various enzymes to work. And so you don't just have a deficiency of MCAD or VLCAD, you've also got these other deficiencies. And the usual therapies that we have restricting or supplementing with different things that you can utilize don't work here because everything is blocked. And so it's been a very, very difficult disorder to treat. And there's a fair amount of experience in literature now that says ketone bodies are a good possibility for folks with GA2. So next slide, please. I was approached recently by a pharmaceutical company called Orpha Labs. and they were interested in trying to develop uses for 3-hydroxybutyrate. And they said to me, "What do you know about GA2?" We talked for a while, and they said, "So this sounds like a good treatment, right?" And I said, "Yeah, that'd be great." So they are now embarking on a path to a clinical trial for GA2. 3-hydroxybutyrate has been available as a supplement or a lab reagent for a long time, but it's the same problem that I've talked about with other supplements or non-pharmaceutical grade materials. You don't always know what you're getting. Sometimes it's too expensive. I treated one patient with GA2, and I was able to pull together enough money to treat him for a couple of months, but then it was, we ran out. So this would be a study that would be available for where it would be like other clinical trials where you wouldn't have to pay for the drug while you were on that trial. We're starting off with natural history studies. One of the most important things we can do when we're starting a clinical trial is to be sure that we can present to the FDA the best information available on the natural history so that we can say we're changing it. There will be some additional laboratory experiments going on, but then hopefully in the next, I would say probably couple of years, we'll be able to get this up and running through the company with GA2 as an indication. So definitely keep your ears and your eyes open for that, and it will come. We'll let you know as soon as it starts. It is something that has been used. Ketone bodies have something that have been used for other long-chain fatty acid oxidation disorders, especially VLCAD deficiency, and there may be some benefit there, but the first indication will likely be for GA2. And I think that's it for me, right, Melanie? Are you taking over next? Do I have one more there? Yep,
I am. Yeah. So I'm going to tell you about a study that's near and dear to my heart. So we just received funding from the NIH to do a natural history study for LCHAD retinopathy. This study has 2 sites, so Pittsburgh and Portland. And the real purpose of this is to characterize vision changes among subjects with LCHAD and TFPD to facilitate the development of novel treatments and plan for future treatment trials. So on the basic science side, we're working on some treatment ideas, and this is sort of laying the groundwork for moving into treatment. So the site investigators are myself in Portland and Dr. Vockley in Pittsburgh. So a little bit about the trial. There's been some very nice advancements in imaging in the eye so that we can actually image the various layers of the retina to really solidify the layer that we think is initially affected and dying in LCHAD. The recruitment, we're going to be recruiting ages 2 to 60. So I think that runs pretty much the span of patients with LCHAD or TFPD. We're trying to recruit a sample size of 40 individuals. So that's a lot of people. So if you are interested, I really encourage you to reach out to us. The study is 2 visits. So it does require travel to OHSU or Pittsburgh. And that's because the fancy cameras that image the layers of the eye are not available in all places. So to try to really get the imaging that we'd like to get on the retina, it really requires these 2 study visits. Each visit is about 2 to 3 days of ophthalmologic tests, some quality of life questionnaires. We are, through the grant, covering all of your travel expenses, hotel, et cetera, for the patient and a caregiver to come. And then we are reimbursing you for your time for the participant for about $500 a visit. We're doing it at a baseline visit and then 2 years later seeing you again to look at change over time. And we did our first subject visit last week. So we are starting to open this up. I think it depends a lot on how comfortable you feel with traveling right now with COVID. I think everything went really well last week and everyone was wearing masks, but it does add a layer of challenge when you're trying to participate in a clinical trial in the midst of all that's going on across the country. But we're looking forward to getting started and enrolling more patients at both sites and really hoping to ramp up in September, October. If you're interested, the two primary study coordinators are Ashley Geiger here at OHSU and Elizabeth McCracken at Pittsburgh. Liz, as Jerry's mentioned before, is one of his study coordinators that coordinates a lot of his research trials. And this is funded by the NIH, the Institute for Child Health and Human Development. Another study that we are starting at OHSU is a smaller sort of pilot trial. We are looking into some sudden cardiac arrest risk factors in adolescents and young adults with LCHAD. The purpose of this study is to really do some comprehensive cardiac evaluations on young adult patients who have had a history of cardiac issues compared to those who may have not. And I'm partnering with a cardiac imaging cardiologist, Dr. Balaji, here at OHSU to do this trial. It's a small, as I mentioned, a pilot trial. We're interested in enrolling about 6 subjects. In the tests that we're going to be doing include obviously a detailed physical exam, but we're also going to be doing cardiac MRI, so being an MRI machine looking at your heart. A stress test, which would be on a bicycle where you would pedal, and we would see how your heart does with exercise, and some blood samples. It's a one study coming to OHSU for one visit, about 2 days of testing to complete all these studies. And it's funded by a cardiac tall worker grant from OHSU and the FOD support group. So we appreciate that support, and we're going to be looking at cardiac function in real detail. So the next two we're going to talk about are both sponsored by Reneo, and I believe Dr. Vockley has mentioned this in a couple of his talks about the PPAR delta agonist. So PPAR deltas is a transcription factor that kind of upregulates the mitochondria, so it makes more mitochondria, more fatty acid oxidation enzymes. I think the analogy that Dr. Vockley gave was like a 6-cylinder versus an 8-cylinder car, revs up the engine a little bit. And this is a oral medication that you take once a day. So the Reneo trial is an open label trial of the PPAR delta agonist. Right now, the inclusion criteria are a diagnosis of CPT2, VLCAD, LCHAD, or trifunctional protein. It is in adults right now. The FDA prefers us starting in adults before we move to children. It's a daily dose of 100 milligrams for 12 weeks. So far, we have completed 9 subjects in the trial, and we're hoping to add 6 additional subjects for Part A. And there are 4 sites: OHSU, Pittsburgh, Chicago, Salt Lake. And for Part B, we're actually going to open it up for 15 more subjects and more sites. And there'll be slightly less studies included in the Part B. Let's see. What else I want to say about that one. We are on hold right now because of coronavirus, but we are planning on opening up soon. And we would love to talk to you if anyone is interested in this particular trial. Just a little bit about the studies that we're doing, at least at OHSU. We're going to continue to be doing some treadmills. We're going to be looking at cardiomyopathy, so echocardiograms. We'll be collecting data on any sort of incidence of rhabdomyolysis, as well as a lot of quality of life surveys. Exploratory endpoints are going to be using some stable isotopes to measure change in fatty acid oxidation. And this is the link on clinical trials. And when I was in the exhibit hall, there's also a link on the Reneo exhibit to go to this webpage that describes the study in more detail at the clinical trials website. And this one's actually the last one we're going to talk about, and it's called the Forward Study. And this one just was posted on clinical trials this week, so the timing was a lot of fun. And the purpose of this study is, again, more of a natural history study. It's sponsored by Reneo, and it's looking at adults with FAO disorders to try to characterize kind of the adult experience, which is not very well described in the literature. So again, it's going to be 18 years and older, the same long chain defects. It's actually going to be a lot broader. So it's going to include 10 countries in the US and in Europe. And we're going to be recruiting about 90 different patients. And it's going to include a 12-minute walk test. So having you walk for 12 minutes to see how far you go for 12 minutes. We're going to be doing some quality of life surveys, looking at muscle pain, lethargy, a lot of other symptoms that go along with FAODs. So I'm excited about this trial getting started. So the primary outcome measure is looking at the 12-minute walk test. Secondary one is to look at muscle symptoms specifically. It includes 2 visits to the clinical site, so a baseline and then 4 months later. And we'll be looking at sort of trying to evaluate how frequently muscle symptoms impact your life when living with an adult living with one of these disorders. So that one should be getting started, we hope, in September or October, again, as we move forward with open clinical trials. I believe that's my last slide, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we could take some questions.
Yeah, Melanie, the Ultragenics folks confirmed that their studies will be for 10 years, and that they'll post information both through Inform and Mito Action, or you can email them directly at medinfo@ultragenics.com to sign up for those. And then we do have a couple of questions already. I think I just answered the first one. Nora Bow asks, how do we sign up for this? And I assume that was the Ultragenics set of follow-up trials. And if you haven't heard about those yet from your clinical sites or your investigative sites, it's because they're just starting. You know, this is really all brand new, so they'll be coming out. And then the question about Reneo's study for patients under 18 is absolutely the next step, and it just depends on how quickly we can do get the over 18 trial filled. So for you over 18 patients, come on in. We'll get you enrolled and into the study as quickly as possible, and that will make room for the next cohort, which will probably go down to, I don't know, 14, 12. I forget where the FDA said how low we could go. It depends on things. Let's see. There's a question about sharing preliminary findings with the Reneo trial. Don't think any of that's public yet. If anyone from Reneo is on and wants to tweak me and let me know what we're allowed to say, I'll be happy to circle back on that. I'm watching my email and also the chat box. So just drop me a note.
Can you be in more than one study at a time? Alex is asking. That's a really good question. And the FDA is really specific that you cannot be on 2 investigational drugs at the same time. So while C7 was still investigational, you could not, for instance, be in C7 and on the Reneo study. Now that C7 is approved, then in theory, you could take a different investigational drug, but you couldn't, for instance, take beta hydroxybutyrate as an investigational drug and the PPAR delta. You can only be on one investigational drug at a time. Now, at least for the natural history study for LCHAD, the eye study, you can be on there's no drug involved. So for natural history studies, you can be on a natural history study and an investigational drug study. But you couldn't do 2 investigational drugs at the same time.
And then there's a question about for trials that include walking, are leg braces allowed?
Yes. So for the Reneo trial, it does include walking, and we have used leg braces. Any sort of walking supports that someone would need is completely allowed. You're allowed to stop and take rest. So if you can't continue and need to take a break, I've had several patients who've had to sit down for a little bit. So yes, that's completely allowed.
And keep in mind, what we're trying to do there is show an improvement. So if you start the trial and you're not doing very well, and 4 months into it, which is when we bring you back for the next point, at least the 6-minute walk, if you're doing better, then that's a positive result from the standpoint of the study. Let's see. Oh, Melanie, here's a great question. Siblings. I have 2. I assume that means LCHATers, age 12 and 20. Any studies planned looking at siblings?
That is a great question. I don't think we have studies that are excluding siblings, but I don't know that there's enough siblings out there to look at comparing sibling data per se. But I don't, like our natural history studies, I think both children would qualify. If that's
and I think that this falls into the category of where we're trying to cast a broad net with all of these natural history studies, and we will as they mature, naturally be able to think about and ask different questions that we might not have thought about in the beginning. For example, like siblings, if we suddenly look at it and we say, holy cow, we have 10 pairs of siblings, let's look at whether they're similar or different in a family, that would be a very valuable piece of information to bring to the treatment and family communities, and so it all goes back to encouraging you to be aggressive in signing up for these natural history studies if you qualify for them. Let's see, for a patient who will turn 18 in November, well, you will be eligible for anything as of your birthday. So I'll say happy birthday in advance and give us a call. We can't enroll you until after your 18th birthday, but we can collect information and sort of get you in the queue for what would be a formal first visit where we talk to you about the study and do the consent.
The next question is about the retinopathy study for LCHAD, and is it limited to a certain number of participants in certain windows of time? Yes, we are stratifying on age range. So we do want a wide age range. So we have age range buckets like 2 to 7, 7 to 14, something like that. And then over 21. And we are including patients in all of those age ranges. So I suppose if that bucket is full, then we would be looking for children or participants of different ages. But that's true for both sites. So we would be stratifying. And as I mentioned, we've enrolled 1. So we still have at least 39 participants that we were looking for. So right now we're wide open.
Plenty of openings there.
Yes.
The next question is also a very interesting one. That's wondering if any of the study data is correlated to the specific mutations in the FAOD gene, and the answer is yes and no. We're most definitely collecting the mutation information. And we'll do our best to try to assess that in patients. enrolled in the trials, but it's difficult because outside of the common LCHAD mutation, almost everybody else has a private mutation. They're one of only a very small number, if not the only known in that gene. So it's pretty hard to do with the kind of size cohorts that we deal with in these rare disease clinical trials. Where we are trying to make some headway in that area is in the laboratory. So in my laboratory, I do all of these studies on cell lines. You or your child may have had a little skin biopsy. We take a little cookie cutter punch, 3 millimeters, take it out of the forearm or sometimes the thigh, and we can grow those cells up in the laboratory and use them to test the response to different drugs. And I can tell you that unequivocally, there are differences in different cell lines from different patients with different mutations in their response to these different genes, these different drugs. If any of you heard my talk yesterday, I entitled it A Personalized Medicine Approach to Fatty Acid Oxidation Disorders, and that's what I mean. One of my pipe dreams is that what we'll be able to do here is when you get seen in clinic, you'll either get your biopsy or you'll be reminded to get the cells that were previously stored put away and saved for other purposes. Well, this is another purpose. They can go to a central lab somewhere, hopefully not mine. I'll teach somebody else to do all this stuff. Can't do it all. And then we'll just test it on all of the drugs that are available, and we'll say this looks like the right medication or group of medications for you. So hopefully that's not a pipe dream, and will come to the to be standard practice. Let's see. Is there one spot to register for all these trials, or register interest in all these trials? No, but it's a great idea. It's something that we could probably implement at the level of Inform. So I'll look into it and get back to you. You know, typically what we tell folks is if you're interested in something, go to clinicaltrials.gov. And we don't. You know, it's sort of hard for us to keep track of everybody who might be interested. I mean, I can tell you, and I'm probably speaking for Dr. Gillingham as well here, if you've been to see one of us, you're on our list. So if we know you're eligible for a trial, we'll be in touch. But if you haven't been to see us, you know, we would, you need a way to find out about these things. I will talk to our Inform webmaster and see if there's a way that we can start a interest registry for that would include your disease, your date of birth, and just a blanket. You know, let me know when there are clinical trials available. Also, though, make it a point to go to the Inform website, because it's really one of the things that we're trying to do with that consortium. The family, the Inform families part of that is designed to keep you up to date on things like this.
I think we've answered them.
Oh, one more popped out about skin biopsies done for small fiber neuropathy. Could those be tested? Only if they took the skin part of that and grew it up in the laboratory and saved it. Unfortunately, pathologists don't always think that far in advance. And if you send somebody for a biopsy that says look at the nerves, they just look at the nerves. Anytime I send a patient for a procedure, if they haven't had a biopsy for fibroblast culture, that's the words you need to know. I tell the surgeons to grab something, send it to my lab, and we start that up and keep it going. All right. Well, we managed to get back on schedule here, Dr. Gillingham. Excellent job.
Thank you both. I appreciate that. That was huge.
Kyra, we'll turn it back over to you.
Perfect. Thank you guys both so much, Dr. Gillingham and Dr. Vockley. Dr. Vockley, I have to say, you have become a Zoom rock star this weekend.
Well, maybe there's some money to be had there somewhere. I don't know. We'll see if we can monetize it somehow.
That's wonderful. I love it. So leading from this session, we'll be going into our break, and Dr. Vockley will be available again in the lounge with a Q&A session. Annette Hines and her husband, Mark, will be available in the lounge to continue the discussion about disability and estate planning. We will have the disease-specific breakout groups, and then we will come back together here in the auditorium for our very last session to talk about cardiac issues and FAOD. So
and Kyra, if I can interrupt for 1 second, I just got an email back from the CMO for Reneo, who said, I can say, hang on, I'm going to read this so I don't get it wrong.
Okay.
Don't want to get Alex mad at me. Fair to say we have seen some positive response, but not in all patients, and we need to do more studies. So I'm glad we've had some patients who've actually done quite well on it. So we'll let it go at that.
That's wonderful. I mean, this is all so exciting, so much research. And one of the things that I tell people is that what we know for sure is that somewhere in the world, 24 hours a day, there's a light on in a lab where someone's studying rare disease.
You got it.
So that's something that everyone should remember. So go take a break. We got a few minutes before our next session start at noon. Thank you, everybody. Dr. Gillingham, Dr. Vockley, we appreciate you, and we will see you all in just a few moments.
Bye-bye.
Bye.